more minute. We're still waiting for folks to come into the room. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Harper. I am a recovery specialist with C4 Innovations and have the wonderful opportunity to work with the SAFE project on the campus coalition. And today we are in for a treat. I'm so excited to get these speakers together for another fantastic Safe Campuses webinar conversation, supporting motivation to change, motivational interviewing and recovery. Today, we're going to hear from our expert for the first part of the conversation, and then we have invited two phenomenal folks with lived experience to share their interpretation of the recovery process from their perspective. So I'm going to kick it off and introduce our keynote speaker today, Ken Craneville, who is a dear colleague of mine at C4. He is a senior trainer in MSW and has worked in healthcare, behavioral health, homelessness, and housing for more than 35 years. Ken has also got 18 years of experience working as a behavioral health practitioner in homeless services. For the past 2 decades, he's been developing curricula, facilitating in-person and online trainings nationally on topics including motivational interviewing, trauma-informed care, outreach and engagement, case management, and critical time intervention, as well as supervision. He also has experience facilitating strategic planning processes and providing staff retreats focused on fighting resiliency and renewal for care providers. Ken is a member of the International Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers, or MINT. He has a Master's of Social Work degree from the University of Washington, and he has excellent taste in music. I can attest to that. So I'm going to turn it over to Ken now, and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and welcome everyone. Even though I can't see your faces, I trust that you're there. So I've been given the daunting task to provide an overview of motivational interviewing in 30 minutes. And this is usually a 2-day course at least, but that's fine. I actually appreciate the challenge, but just to let you know that I'm gonna try to still make this as show and tell as possible and less me talking about it. So, but we'll probably move at a pretty rapid pace because I want to make sure we leave time for sure for our panelists. So we'll start here with a quiz, which I thought is a good place to start. This is a little tongue-in-cheek, I guess, but I'm going to be using the term motivational interviewing, or we're talking about that a lot, but really we're talking in shorthand about MI. But I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So if you see this and you see the state of Michigan, you are correct. This is MI, but it's not what we are talking about today. Or if you see a myocardial infarction in this image, that is an MI too, but it's not where we're going, nor is the original cast of Mission Impossible, which probably very few of you even know. This was the original TV show, but we are here to talk about this book and concept of motivational interviewing. So I trust that many of you know something about MI and maybe others know nothing. So I'm just going to pretend like we're mostly blank slates. But the history of MI is interesting because it comes out of the substance misuse field. The short story is that William Miller, who was the principal author, ended up working in an alcohol treatment facility inpatient in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, back in I want to say the 1970s or so. And he walked in without really knowing what he was getting into, and he wasn't really given any guidance. And so he started getting to know these men who were there. I think it was all men. And he learned about their lives. They were people who lived in Wisconsin, so they did a lot of hunting and shooting and cheering for the Green Bay Packers, and they wore cheese on top of their heads and all of these kinds of things. And he also learned that they were people who drank a lot of alcohol, and they were relatively forthcoming about that. It wasn't like they were hiding it, but he learned about their lives and also what role alcohol played in their lives. And he says, then I went back and I read the literature about alcoholics. And I imagine many of you know this history, but in the literature during that time, alcoholics were considered pathological liars. They were people who didn't really understand the consequences of their substance use, because they would say things like, well, I don't have a problem, or that guy drinks way more than I do. And the theory of the day, the best practice of the day, if you will, was that people were in denial, meaning that somehow they were so caught up in their behaviors that they couldn't recognize what was going on. And so the treatment of the day looked a lot like heavy confrontation, tearing down defenses, breaking down that wall of denial so that people would be ripe and ready for change. And you can imagine that worked very poorly overall. I'm sure there were a few success cases, but mostly what it did is cause people to be uh, maybe compliant in the milieu just so that they weren't going to be punished. But there was very little lasting change going on. And so this is really where this MI idea comes from. And of course, now it's permeated all of health and human services. Um, so let me just ask, as part of the quiz, another question. Have you ever changed anyone? And feel free to type in the chat box very quickly. It's pretty much a yes or no question. Have you ever changed anyone? Never, says Mitzi. Yes, no. So we're getting some nice mixed things. Yeah, we're getting some nice introductions too. Thank you very much. Well, the fact is that we have changed somebody, and it's been ourselves, and it's the only person we actually can change, or that anybody else, or the fact is nobody else can change us. But of course, we've never changed anybody else. Now, we can change their circumstances, and we change babies' diapers and things like that. But this isn't talking about lasting change. Another more pertinent question is, can you make a difference in people's willingness to make a change? And here, I would hope there was a resounding yes to all of that. One of my favorite quotes related to all of this is this idea that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But I say, you can salt the oats, says Madeline Hunter. Now, I don't even know if that translates for some of you, because it requires some recognition that horses on a farm eat oats, but when you add salt to the oats, it makes sure they drink as well. And so the point obviously is, we can help people become thirsty for making changes in their lives. And we can also make a difference in how parched their thirst is for making change, depending on how we have a conversation with them. So I have a video demo here, and it has nothing to do with collegiate recovery, but it has everything to do with MI. And it's a dental setting, and it's a situation where the dentist is working on this guy's teeth and then notices some staining on the teeth. And so I'm going to read this or show this first one. And this is not how to do motivational interviewing in dental practice. So I'll just ask you to make a few observations, about 3 minutes or so, but observe what you see here, and then I'm going to ask you a series of questions about it. So here we go.
Okay, so why don't you have a rinse, David? How are you feeling?
Okay.
Good. Here, take a look. See what you think. Isn't that feeling?
Yeah.
And the color's okay? There is quite a lot of staining, so I'm just wondering about some concerns about smoking, possibly
Gonna get that again.
coffee, tea. Yeah, you've heard this
I do
before, I'm
all
sure.
the above, yeah.
So, the smoking is going to be related not just to some of the other negative consequences, physically. It affects dental caries, dental cavities.
Yeah.
Healing
Yeah.
in your mouth.
Okay. Sure.
So,
I've heard it all. But I just want to get my teeth fixed.
Yes, and I really want to be helpful. I really want to, my commitment is to your oral health. So there are lots of medications out there, David, that actually take away a lot of the cravings. They make quitting so much easier.
I did the pill thing, so I did try. I just did the pills and they didn't work. It was a waste and it caused more side effects.
No, but David, it's not a waste. Research shows that people take on average about 7 tries before they quit smoking. So think of it as you're one step closer to quitting.
Or 7 lectures along the road.
Well, I don't think I'm giving you a lecture. That's certainly not what I meant.
No, I just feel that way. I get very defensive about it when they bring, because I get it from my family doc, my cardiologist, everybody. I'm not a complete fool. I am for smoking.
Well, there's a reason that people are concerned.
But it's not easy to quit.
No, but as I said, these medications, so you've tried the medication, you've been willing once,
Yeah.
then can I write you a prescription for the medication? Can we talk about how you could use it? Because this is something that's very important, not just for your overall physical health.
I guess I got to really want to. Things I've tried usually cause me more problems than they helped.
Oh no, the smoking's going to cause you more problems than anything else. I can promise you that, David.
Okay.
The side effects from the medications are nothing compared to what can happen from the smoking. Like that's the, I think, thing to really consider.
Okay, well, can I go now?
I'm okay, but
I know, Doc, what you're trying to do, but I just don't want to get into that right now.
Okay, well, thanks for listening. And honestly, I am really worried about the smoking. So
Okay.
I
appreciate your caring.
I'm here to help. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'm actually going to pose some questions, but probably answer them as well, although you're welcome to do so. But I think it's pretty evident that she cares about this patient. She cares about his oral health and her hopes, of course, that he would quit smoking or at least cut down because she does have concerns. So there's not a lack of compassion or empathy, at least for his situation. But what are her methods? What is she doing? And I would be interested if you, in a word or a phrase, want to just put something in the chat box. I think, as you're doing that, I would just say that it's kind of like she's putting vinegar on the oats instead of salt, I think. And what's happening is she's kind of badgering him and trying to get him to change. And as soon as we get into that language of trying to get somebody to change, can you hear the coercion in that? Can you hear the forcefulness? Can you hear the violence in it? And this is very common for helping people because we want to make a difference, right? But as soon as we want to impose our will on people, then we're going to run into a lot of difficulty. What's the outcome? Well, I don't know, but David probably goes out to his car and he lights up not only 1 cigarette, but maybe 2, just because what he's thinking about is, wow, I don't like being lectured. She treated me like a little kid. She kept saying, David, David. And I know she cares, but I just didn't like the way she was doing that. And it didn't. And so what he's talking to himself about is probably like, I'm not even sure I want to go back to see her. Or he's saying maybe if I do go back, I'm going to make sure we don't go there. So not a favorable outcome. He's certainly not giving consideration to the possibility of quitting smoking. And so for all of those reasons, she basically, you might say she was using education on him. And the thing about education is if it's trying to impose stuff on people, then it's not really education. It's kind of like throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping it will stick, but it usually doesn't. So I'm going to show you a second video. And this is after the dentist has gone to a motivational interviewing workshop and just within the last 5 minutes, actually. And I think she's much better. I think you'll agree. So let's take a look.
Okay, David, so why don't you take a rinse and how are you feeling?
Pretty good.
Would you like to check this
yeah.
out? What do you think?
Oh, that one's fixed really nice.
Yeah.
You got rid of that bad
Yeah.
discoloration that was there.
Yeah. No,
I like
think
that.
it went well. Good. Excellent. I did notice quite a lot of staining, actually. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about what might be related to that?
Well, the usual suspects: smoking, wine, coffee,
Yeah.
all of the above.
Any thoughts on considering quitting smoking at this time?
Yeah, I thought about it. It's not my cup of tea. I hear it from everybody, and I've tried before. It didn't work. I get it all the time.
Okay. And it's like, here I am, one more person, the next doctor who's saying, you need to quit smoking, David.
And
And I'm sorry, that's not how I mean to come across it.
I know I'm not an idiot, and people know that smokers are, how can you smoke today? It's just not that easy to quit.
And if it was as easy as a doctor saying, or your partner saying,
Who wouldn't be?
You have to
You'd have to
quit.
be a real fool not to do it if
Yeah.
you was going to make it like that.
yeah,
I just hear it every day.
yeah. And what's been your past experience with smoking? Can you tell me a little bit about kind of how the role it plays in your life, how long you've smoked?
Yeah, I've smoked for 40 years, since I was 14. And quit a couple of times, off and on in the 20s, but it's been consistent. And I can't see myself changing now, no matter what kind of talk I get or what they come up with.
It sounds like almost you've tried a lot of things that are out there, and it's not something
Not
that
going to
you're...
work for me.
Yeah, yeah,
No.
yeah.
I know cold turkey is probably the only thing that's ever going to do it. Anybody that's done it, in my group, it's been cold turkey, and then they fight it. But it's my choice, and I don't like lectures about it.
Yeah, and it really is your choice. You're absolutely right that nobody has the right to tell you what to do. Can I ask, if there was to be a situation where you decided I must quit, what would that situation be?
Hard to tell, because I've already had open heart surgery. That didn't do it. Prostate cancer, that didn't do it.
Right.
I don't know. I really don't know. I just don't really want it.
So this is something that you
Have to-
pretty much see yourself doing for...
Yeah, quite a while yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you being willing to even talk about it. And I get that right now this is not something that you want to pursue. Would it be okay if I brought it up at our next visit? Because I know that you've said you don't want to lecture, but on the other hand, I am concerned.
Okay, yeah, I could go for that. I'm always open to listen.
As long as I don't talk too
Yeah.
much. Okay.
There could be options. I had my surgeon just go like, why do I even keep you as a patient? He's good though.
You were glad to keep him as a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and David, honestly, wherever you're at, we'll work with it.
Okay.
And so thanks for taking a couple of minutes and talking about smoking.
Thanks, Doc.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to invite you to type in the chat box, what did you notice was different between the two? And what did she do? Because our hopes are still the same, but her methods changed dramatically. And in MI speak, we would say she used a lot more open questions. She used reflective listening. She met the person where he was at. She wasn't trying to impose her will on him, but she was trying to get a little more information that allowed him to be a little more reflective about his own smoking. I'm going to guess that when he goes out to the car, he's still going to light up a cigarette, but he's going to be saying, 40 years I've been doing this. And different physical health challenges haven't kept me from doing this. What's that about? And he might be saying, and the cost and the smell and those burn marks, and who knows what he's saying, but he's going to now have a different kind of conversation. And he's also agreed to go back and have that conversation again with the physician or with the dentist. And so he's in a readiness where he's actually, the salt is being put on the oats for him to think further about his own smoking. And we have no guarantee of where that will go, but The fact is that he also has interest in his own health. And he's made reference now several times that, yeah, you must be stupid for smoking. I'm not a fool, but. So again, the tone is different. The line of questioning is different. It's much more exploratory and much less about trying to get him to change. So I'd like to offer you a personal taste of MI, and I'm going to ask you, if you would, to think of a dilemma, an attitude, a concern, something that you yourself are currently having mixed feelings about, and you've been thinking about changing, but you haven't changed it yet, at least not fully. And I'm going to offer you up a whole list of possibilities here in case you can't imagine anything about yourself that you could possibly need to change. But the reason I'm doing this is just to say there are all kinds of things we can have conversations with people about when it comes to change. So if you would, you're not going to reveal this to anybody else, but think about one thing that you're kind of edgy about, you kind of think you ought to change, and yet part of you doesn't really want to, or don't even know how important it is. But I'm going to ask you to come up with one thing, and then I'm going to ask you a series of a few questions, pretty rapid fire, just again for the sake of this webcast. But if you would, think to yourself what that is, maybe even jot down your responses. The first question I would ask of you is, if you choose not to make a change in this area around this issue, what might be at stake? What might be some consequences that would be difficult to live with? So that might be one question. Another question we might ask is, what would be some benefits if you were to change? What would be better for you? Maybe in your life, your relationships. We might also often ask too, how do you think you would go about making a change if you chose to? And we know that there's lots of ways to change, just like there's many pathways to recovery, right? So how for you, what do you think would work for you? Whether you know it would or not, but imagine, brainstorm around that. And what are some of the very best reasons for you? Which ones rise to the top and you say, well, yeah, this is, and these are the kinds of things that the best reasons are almost always tied to a value that's important to that person. And so you're connecting values with behaviors here. Another question might be, who could support you in making this change, given that recovery, change processes, always, you can't do it by yourself, for yourself. We all need a circle of care. We all need people who we can turn to and rely upon and help us out, even though the responsibility lies on us for that change. And then we might ask, what next step or steps might you be willing to take to move in the direction of this change? Because change almost always comes in small incremental steps. And so this would be what I would call a planning phase of just asking somebody, what do you think's one thing that you could do in the next week or two? And maybe it's something like searching the internet for more information, or calling a friend, or making an appointment, or whatever that is. The reason I show you these questions is not that you walk away with a formula and just say, okay, now I'm going to ask you 6 questions. That's not what MI is about. But these are the kinds of questions, and others, that are germane to this thing we call motivation. And motivation involves a desire to change. It involves how you might do it, reasons to change. It also involves sort of the importance of it to you, the urgency. And then you begin exploring, how it might, what steps you might take, and who could help, and that kind of thing. So these slides will be available to you should you come back. And I've also supplied some handouts I hope you will find useful that have some of these same things. But these are all sample questions that actually elicit and strengthen motivation. And when people are treated in a way that we're compassionately curious about them, and we're asking them to look a bit closer in the mirrors of their lives, while that might be somewhat troubling, it's also something that people tend to welcome and are open to. And we tend to have a relational context that is more likely to continue and bear fruit. So the idea that change almost always happens in a positive relationship context is a truism, and it's no different regardless of what the issue is. I'm going to bypass this for the moment, but just saying when you practice in this way, you don't have to have one. First of all, you don't have to have a degree in anything. You just have to be human. That helps, and care. And you don't have to be particularly clever or knowledgeable or complex. It just really being interested in uncluttering your own mind of all the ways that you think that that person should change, and stepping back from that. And it's really, MI is an approach that it certainly explores the past and the present, but it's really focused on helping people envision their future, moving forward. And so a lot of the questions begin with, if you were to make a change, for example, why might you want to do that? How might you do it? Who could help you? And it's really just helping people imagine what could be. So definitionally, what we're talking about here is a collaborative conversation style. And I put emphasis on style because it's not a formulaic approach. It's a way of being with people, and it uses your own personal style and personality and sense of humor and wackiness and weirdness. But within that, you're having a purposeful conversation with somebody for the purpose of trying to help them identify and become more motivated to change. The key to this is that motivation already lies within people. You can't motivate people. What you can do is create the conditions for them to be thirsty for change. So the idea here is that within people lies a desire for health and safety and well-being and connection and all of the good things of life that we all hope for. And at the same time, there's a lot that kind of covers that up, the muck of trauma, the muck of addiction, the muck of, challenges in life, health-wise and mental health-wise. And what happens is it's harder to shine a light on some of that motivation, but that's what our task is, to really shine a light on that, but also to recognize the ambivalence that people experience, meaning that we are all ambivalent people. It's a very normal thing. And we want to change, we don't want to change. We want to change, we don't want to change. Or we think we should, but we don't know how we would do it, and so on and so forth. And so ambivalence is really, instead of the notion of denial, ambivalence is what's really at the heart of this approach. And it's recognizing that ambivalence exists. You've probably seen something similar to this meme. This is the Nike symbol, of course, but it's a little distorted. And this is what it actually means. And we've all been there, right? When you kind of just want to do it, but not really. We're there right all the time. You might even be in that space right now thinking, I'd like to be on this webcast, and a part of me would like to be out doing something different. It's all good. What happens, of course, and I will make these videos available, is when you come forward and you say, hey, you should go this direction, and part of you says, yeah, but I don't really want to, that it creates this conflict. So one of the things we know, for example, if you tell a person, and lots of people tell a person, hey, you need to stop using, you need to change your life, you need to let go of that stuff, and we just say, you got to quit. What will happen is, based on the research, that people will actually oftentimes not only continue to use whatever they're using, but they will actually increase their use. And I think what lies at the heart of that is the importance of personal autonomy to make our own decisions for ourselves. And that's precisely what MI depends upon. All right. Another way to think about this is it's a way of helping people talk themselves into changing. And we do this by, each of us does this by kind of having conversations with ourselves and with others about our own behaviors, our own attitudes, and how do they mesh with our hopes and our values and also our fears. And out of that, we will find ourselves saying things like, I'd like to change, I have reasons to, it's important to me. Of course, there's always a but, right? But eventually, we might even get to the point of saying, you know what? going to try it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take some steps in this direction. And this is really, in an oversimplified way, the change process that happens for many of us. And that process can take place over minutes, days, weeks, months, years, many years, where we have this ongoing conversation. But we want to help people reach a tipping point of at least being willing to try something in a different direction. And as I close here, I'm just going to point out a few additional factors of MI that are really important and you have in your handouts. But we talk about all of this happening within a partnering, accepting, compassionate, evocative kind of mindset and heart set that we have towards people. And our conversations often have a flow to them through engaging and focusing and evoking and planning. And I'll leave that for what it is. And then we use these particular skills to have these conversations that you see here in the convenient acronym of OARS. So here are the key ideas. I'll let you read them for yourselves. Speed reading. All right, so there you have it. 30 minutes of MI. Thank you for your attention, and I will pass this back. Do I need to stop sharing the screen yet or not?
If you don't mind, yeah, I think we're going to switch over and let Dylan control the screen now. But Ken, thank you so much. I know that was a huge challenge. And I'm sure all of you enjoyed that just as much as I did. You understand now why usually these trainings take multiple days, but we just wanted to give you a little taste in case you are curious about getting some more information from Ken. We'll make sure to get the slides and the handouts and his contact information to you after the presentation. So thank you so much, Ken. Thank you. So now we're going to switch over to our panelists. And I have to say, when I was working with the SAFE project team, Dylan, especially Dylan Dunn, we were thinking about really wanting to talk about what motivates especially collegiate recovery students or future collegiate recovery students to change. And I'm sure that some of you can identify as other people in recovery like myself or professionals that are in these settings that we haven't really had a whole lot of guidance on how to support students directly with motivational interviewing, I think, as a community. When I think about back when I first started my career back in 2008 at Georgia Southern, I came from a very conservative recovery background, and my training was not based in MI. And so I've done a lot of damage over the years with students. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to invite these two particular folks to the panel today, because I think we've all been through some serious transformations over the years that we're happy to talk about that have gotten us to a pretty cool place now. So I'm going to invite Chase and Liesl to join me on camera. And we're going to start having our panel discussion. There you go. Hey, y'all. Go ahead and test out your mics. We can make sure we hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you, Chase.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Thanks, Liesl. So the first question is, I would love for you just to briefly introduce yourselves, and we'll start with Chase.
So like was mentioned, my name is Chase Holloman. I'm a clinical social worker and clinical addiction specialist. But I also like to share another identity, which is that I'm a person in recovery. And for me, that means I've been in remission from my substance use disorder for some time now. And the idea of that has changed for me over time as well, which is something I imagine we'll be talking about. I work with a program in North Carolina, a countywide program, and we support people at risk for overdose in our community. We're housed at the university, and our team is full of students. Some of them might be in the audience today. So I do get a chance to be with students all day, and it's amazing. We just do stuff like syringe services and post-overdose response, and try and support folks however we can.
Thanks, Chase. It's so great to have you here with us today. And this is one of my former students from way back in the day, Liesel. We got to spend some time together in Lubbock, Texas, which, if you know anything about Lubbock, Texas, there's not much to look at out there, so you get really close to the community. So thank you so much for joining us, Liesel. If you introduce yourself now.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Kristen. Hi, everyone. My name is Liesel Wyatt Long. And I just want to say I love the way Chase introduces himself, and I'd like to capitalize on that as well, that I'm a person who is living in long-term recovery. And for me, that means that I haven't picked up a drink or a drug since July 21st of 2010. As a profession, I currently work in the Department of Public Health at a university here in Lubbock. And for me, what that means is I typically participate in cancer research as well as healthcare policy. And so my contributions to my recovery community involve working with our city council, as well as some of our legislators here to keep abreast of the new wave of recovery and what's coming down the pike. So that is what I primarily focus on now.
Thank you, Liesel. Thank you so much for being with us today. So just to kick off the conversation, I have a question for both of you, and either one, take turns if you'd like to go first. When you think back to the early days of contemplating starting a recovery path, what was that like? What initiated the process for you? Was it a conversation? Was it an event? Was it an internal motivation? Think back if you could, and just share that with us.
Yeah, Chase, if it's okay, I'll go first with this one. In 2009, I went through a divorce, and from July of 2009 till July of 2010, I just rode the vehicle till the wheels proverbially fell off. But during that time, I was actually seeing a counselor, and I was seeing a counselor for something completely separate than substance use. And as we were continuing through these sessions, he very kindly would ask me, are you ready to talk about your drinking? And for months I said no. And honestly, a couple of times I showed up inebriated to my sessions, which is, I definitely don't recommend that. But instead of, kicking me out, he would sit with me and typically be quiet. And he would say, what do you need from me in this moment? There's not much therapeutic stuff that I can offer right now, but if you need a safe place to be for the next hour, right here is good with me. And knowing that I had a safe place to go when I was not okay, was, I guess, the initial seed that was planted. And then I had an accident on a watercraft and almost died. And my next session with that, I remember looking at my counselor and I said, okay, I'm ready to talk about my drinking. And I didn't know what that was going to mean. But that's actually initially how it got started. It was probably almost a full year in the making. And Kristen, you asked if it was a conversation or an event. And I think it was a combination of both. And knowing that I had a person who was interested in my well-being, so much so that he would continue to ask to kind of gauge my willingness. Mm-hmm. So I had MI for about a whole year before I decided to make a better decision.
Thanks, Liesel. I appreciate that. You reminded me of, actually, my first MI conversation was with a peer of mine while we were still using. And I remember driving in the car and she's like, how do you feel about our drug use? Which I thought was a very strange question, but I was like, oh yeah, I'll be able to stop whenever I want, but I'm never going to quit drinking. Yeah. And so that was my first stage. It was like, yeah, I'll probably have to, like, when I'm a grown up, when, have kids and stuff, I probably won't be able to do drugs, but I'll always be able to drink, right? Chase, what about you?
No, I'm glad that I went second, because it made me think, because my idea of, my own recovery changes, from day to day, I think, and it's a constant evolution. I know that it certainly was not a singular event. I think before I would have told you it was the second time that I went to treatment and surrendered for the first time in my life. I don't believe that to be true anymore for myself. I think that there were a lot of moments that I tried to initiate positive change in my life, which is now what I believe is recovery. I think the first time that I threw away my stuff and swore to myself I was not going to use the next day was positive change in my life, and started taking steps, however small, in that non-linear path. but yeah, I think ultimately though, it started with people being kind to me and, hope, just literally just the ability and confidence to see a different future for myself, which I had not had before.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was like 19 or 20, before I started making those small incremental changes, I could not envision myself living past 23. That's where my mindset was. It's like, there's no way I can live past 23. And for some reason, that was my marker. And got some help by the time I was 21, luckily. But yeah, I can identify with that. So my next question, and I think we already started to kind of talk about it, is how do you define your recovery today? If you do define it, is it more of a practice instead of like a category that we should use for people?
Yeah, I was trying to be polite and say, I answered the last one first, but I'll just go ahead. Uh, yes, for me, defining my recovery is more based in principle. And by that, I mean that it has changed so much in the time that I've been on this journey. I think that's really honestly the best way for me to put it, because and Chase made such a good point that on a daily basis, there are decisions I have to continue to make. And I have to gauge what I'm willing to risk and what I'm not willing to risk. And I also want to self-disclose that I'm not a person that only suffers with substance use disorder. I'm also an individual who in the past has struggled with sexual addiction. And even in my life today, I continue to battle with an eating disorder. And so for me, part of why that has to be viewed as a journey, I have to stick to things that I know don't get me caught in that shame cycle of I failed at this because it's one sentinel event and I've got to just call it quits. I cannot do that. And so for me, the way that I know that I'm on the right track is not because I don't fail. Unfortunately, I fail often with my eating disorder. And but I do take some primary principles, which is that it's just for today. And I really focus on what I can do right now, what I can do today. And then the second thing for me is I continually gauge my willingness. And I still have that today, even through the struggles and some of the failures that I've had. And so for me, that is how I personally define it. And those conversations aren't just internal. They're not just with myself. I have a lot of these conversations. I actively see a therapist even all this time later because I have to. And that would be probably the third piece of what I would consider my recovery, is that I don't view this as an island. I view this as an entire connection. And when one thing is not working for me anymore, I don't limit myself to trying something new or reaching out and asking questions. And that's how I would define being in recovery for me.
Thank you, Liesl. You're so awesome. I appreciate that. Chase.
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly to the first question, I don't know. It's something I'm thinking about all of the time. I think of myself as a person in recovery. What that means to me is very different. I think it's easier for me to say what I don't think it means for myself, and how that's changed. I mentioned making positive changes being the start of my recovery. And, before it would have been a singular event in time, and it would have had to do with surrender and willingness and, all of these different things, but most accurately defined by the time that I stopped using substances to the time, however much time I had not using substances. And I think it's worth mentioning and disclosing that my recovery has changed significantly, because I was one of those people that was like, I'm never going to give up drinking, and then I did. I did it. I was fully abstinent from everything for, close to 7 years. And in the last year or so, that has changed for me. I'm not fully abstinent. I will have a drink. And what that looks for me, or my relationship with alcohol, is just that. I still feel like I'm in remission. I have not had any clinical criterion or any life disruption. I'm still able to live out my intentions. which is, I think, what was defining of, my substance use disorder before recovery. But yet I'm still, like, talking about this is still therapeutic, because despite me intellectually knowing that and feeling good about it, I'm still unlearning, what I've learned before. And I still have messages from people. I mean, there are a significant amount of people that were once very important in my life that don't feel like I'm in recovery anymore and don't associate with me. And that's something that I think is worth saying out loud, and how, hard that can be, feeling for yourself an identity, but other people saying, no, that's not your identity. So it's, I think it's an evolving situation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Chase. That leads me to our next question, talking about some of the institutional harms that have been done. Being somebody that's received help and then also been a provider, it's really interesting to go back and review some of the dogma that I learned early on, and how that could potentially be harmful, and not directed at any sort of particular pathway at all. I mean, there's so many pathways that have helped millions of people, that are continuing to help millions of people. But I think sometimes, programs, institutions, clubs, groups of people can take the principles to an extreme. And I wanted to put that out there and just ask, what are some areas that we need to be careful of? And I think, Chase, you brought up a really great point, which is basically exclusion of people that we love and care about because they don't hold the same principles that we hold. Just a personal story of mine is I've lost a couple of really close friends that I was a spiritual advisor to them through suicide. And, I look back on my relationships with them, and, I think I did the best that I could at the time. It definitely was a red flag that there's some areas that within the recovery community we really need to be more sensitive to. So I'd love to hear if y'all have identified any of those over the years. If you could just speak to those, that'd be great.
I'm happy to start with this one. And the truth is, I have to say that I have and probably still do perpetuate harm against people that use drugs. I think never intentionally, and I think I practice more and more to do less so now. And I think when I was perpetuating harm before, I genuinely thought that I wasn't. I thought that I was doing a good thing, probably similarly to how that dentist felt in the first clip. And not realizing it. And I think that that's coded into me, and something that I'll continuously fight. We're a society that does not value and does not care for people who use drugs. And that is codified into our laws. We put people in cages for using drugs. And just intellectually, me knowing that that is wrong does not stop me from perpetuating that. And I have to own it. And I think the first time that my eyes were open to this, and I have to talk about just the evolution and journey, because it's been so much and so many teachers. And Kristen, I know you know Chris Budnick in North Carolina, and he is a clinician. He wrote a letter, an amends letter, to all of the people. I want to get emotional thinking about it, like to all the people that he denied treatment to, or that he had to ask to leave treatment because they showed him that they really needed his help. And it was just so powerful for me to read and realize, like, God, like, are we just doing this wrong? And like seeing the people just, and experiencing it now, just leaving folks, the most important, valuable thing they have is their positive connections. And when they show us that they really need that, that's what we take away. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I almost brought up the letter during the same conversation, so I'm glad you did, Chase. Thank you, and we'll send it out because it is a beautiful. It's beautiful, so we'll send it out. Lisa, would you like to share?
I would. I am actually a little choked up over here. As we're, I look, I'm going to apologize just because I feel like it's the thing I need to do, but I am sure that y'all can understand that sometimes tapping into some of this is an emotional process. And as we were talking about harm that we've done to people, I was actually recognizing that, Chase, as you were talking, that there are things that are coming up in me that more will be revealed. I don't know. It's coming up for me. And I think I was a very rigid 12-step person when I first started. And I won't deny that in the beginning that worked for me because I just didn't have any respect for authority. And, I have reasons for that. And most of them are childhood traumas, but I just didn't. So for me, having to unlearn that fear required me to fully surrender to something that I had no say in. However, as I continued to grow, and the way I typically describe it is I entered into recovery to learn how to live. I never intended it to be my entire life. And so what happened for me is I started figuring out how to live, but I wasn't growing in the way that, and I have to admit, I'm not even sure where it came from, but I just really didn't feel like I was growing. And in fact, I felt stagnated. And, but I did not want to drink. And so I had to make a very difficult decision given the area that I'm in, because it's a small community and everybody is very close, to take a step away. Primarily because the number one thing that I was struggling with was my eating disorder. And I continued to hear that I was not welcome if I continued to struggle with that I couldn't say I was in recovery. So the only thing I could claim was abstinence. And I couldn't manage to string together 3 days without it. And, I was dying. So, and I perpetuated that too. I perpetuated that because I bought into the doctrine and I stayed that way without recognizing that I needed something else. And for me, it took stepping away and losing some of those connections to reaffirm some things that I needed, and to give me opportunity to look elsewhere. And when I started having those conversations, it did make my environment a little bit smaller. But as most of us are experiencing, we have some responsibility to grow that community. And part of that is sharing my story. And that is one of the reasons why I was really glad that Kristen asked me to share on this, because it's something that I just haven't had a platform to do. And I haven't been able to fully admit that I perpetuated some harmful beliefs and some harmful activities to other people, both knowingly and unknowingly. Thinking about it now, I watched people struggle when I tell them this is the only way you can do it. And then when they'd fall off, I would ignore them. I would say, I don't want to be around people that use, and all these things that I was told that are just not helpful to people. And unfortunately, it took me going through it myself to figure that out. But I will say that's one thing that I continue to do is self-reflect and know when I know when I'm wrong. I know when I'm wrong, and I feel it at a very visceral, central level of my body. And so if there's anything that rigidity in the beginning gave me, it's that. But it was not sustainable. I had to learn how to have a life in order for this to be sustainable for me.
Thank you both so much. That was awesome. And just recovering from some of the trauma that's self-imposed and that we got just from, going into certain communities after, years of abuse with ourselves and, the substance use disorder on top of everything else. So we have plenty of time left. If you have questions out there in the audience world, please feel free to type them in the chat box, or you can put them in the Q&A. We'd be happy to address your questions. I think, tying in some of the topics we talked about with motivational interviewing, we can talk about things that have worked for us over the years and continue to work. And I think I love, Chase earlier said, it was people that were kind to him that got through. And I remember that it was like my grandmother, there was one therapist, friends that I'd, used drugs with. They were all just very kind and had these conversations with me. They got me thinking, and today I define my recovery by that sense of feeling connected to something bigger. And that's pretty much how I define it. It's pretty simple. If I'm feeling disconnected, then I know for me that's a red flag warning and I got to do something, whether it's therapy, whether it's getting out into nature, whether it's going to a support group. And so I'm just curious how we could tie the MI piece together for collegiate recovery professionals and help them understand why this approach of MI can be a much more positive experience than some of the fear-based tactics that we've all experienced. Chase, you look like you want to say something.
I will. I saw Ken type in the chat that MI is kindness with skill, and while you were talking about it, I just started thinking about those people in my life that had been kind to me before. You know, when I probably wasn't a person that was easy to be kind to, and it makes me smile. But as far as motivational interviewing, I really enjoyed the presentation, and I spend time thinking about and talking about motivational interviewing every single day of my life. I teach it, I practice it, and I don't just practice it. Sorry for the noise. I live on a main road. I don't just practice it with, you know, people, you know, participants or people, you know, I'm obligated to serve, but I practice it with myself and with my students and with my friends and with everyone. And it's funny teaching it, and people start to catch on that you're doing it, and they're like, well, why are you therapizing me? You know, and it's like, well, I'm not, you know, for me, this is kind of like, this is more Rogerian. It's like a way of being, you know, it's a way of thinking about things. It's a way of just approaching the world and approaching relationships. And, you know, I know when I'm not doing it, or I'll become aware when I'm not doing it quickly. Because I certainly don't do it perfectly, but yeah, I mean, it's just so nice to be aligned with people in my relationships, and just, you know, try and practice that unconditional positive regard, and you know, ask how I can help people in their own self-directed goals, because it's frustrating to try and impose your will on someone and it doesn't work. So it's just a little more practical. And then of course for myself, like allowing myself to have ambivalence, right? Like existing in the gray, you know, and I think that's been, you know, I'll shortly say, I think that that's been immensely helpful. And also really I've had to have that to do recovery the way that I've done it the last year. I've had to live and embrace and love that gray world in the mixed motivation and ambivalence.
Thank you so much, Chase. I really appreciate that. Lisa, we got to leave space for Dylan to come back on and give announcements, but I'd love to hear your response to this question.
Yeah, I'll be quick. So in a general sense, I get to use MI almost every day, being a behavioral scientist. So the interesting part about it is that, you know, I have my understanding of it in this capacity. And it's really interesting to use concepts like reflective listening and engaging and asking questions, because it's like sometimes you'll be in a crowd of people that have no contextual understanding of what's going on. I think I saw in the chatter, it was like the Jedi mind trick. And sometimes people will do that thing where it's like, wow, I never thought about that. And of course I'm sitting here thinking like, well, it's probably a good thing you didn't have to drink and do drugs to learn it, but you know, here's some helpful information. But yeah, I will close with this. The change happened because the person I love had a change before I did. And when she told me that she was afraid to tell me, something was wrong, and it broke my heart. And I realized at that point in time that even the people closest to me knew they could not trust me with their growth. And that is when I legitimately had to make a change. And so that conversation happened very organically, and it has continued to permeate all places in my life, even in the professional sphere. And so that's really how I work it into my everyday life.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Ken, Chase, Liesel. That was awesome. And thank you, Dylan and the SAFE Project team, Air, Hannah, for allowing me to participate. Again, I feel like I get so much out of these conversations. So Dylan, I'll turn it back over to you.
I feel like I'm interrupting this magic that's been happening for the past like hour. But just to close, again, thank you to Ken, thanks to Kristen, thanks to Chase and Liesel. I mean, these webinars keep getting better and better, and it's because of folks like you that they keep doing that. So thank you. Just some 2 quick announcements just to kind of talk about some safe stuff. First, we're doing a national campaign, like a pledge to talk about there being no shame and getting help for mental health and addiction. So if you want to be part of that movement and take that pledge, just go to safeproject.us. And then we have a phenomenal free app for students and allies in recovery. It's the Reconnected app, connecting collegiate recovery alumni and current students. So if that is in any way interesting to you or could be a benefit to you and your community or your university, you can get that app on the Google Play Store and the App Store. It's free again. And if you will need a code for your university to get in, that's how we kind of monitor the barriers of that space to keep it safe. Just email reconnected@safeproject.us. And again, you'll get an email from me with all the follow-up information that Ken has shared, the letter, and then anything else that we want to include to make sure you all kind of leave this time with, and we'll include a link to Reconnected, no shame, and then you can answer any questions you have. So you can just respond directly to that. That's the top of the hour. So again, I appreciate all of you. Thank you for your time. Thanks for all the attendees. This is our most attended webinar so far by a fair margin. So again, thanks to everybody and have a good afternoon.